On June 26th of last year, I woke up sweating, gasping for air, and feeling really anxious. For the couple of weeks before that, I was really low energy and getting winded way too easily, so I made an appointment with my general practitioner, hoping the referral would get me an earlier cardiology appointment than I would have gotten calling myself. During that appointment, I kind of feel like I had more of a sense of urgency than the nurse practitioner who saw me. I ended up getting a beta blocker and a little monitor to wear for a week, which I would mail in and have assessed. I did manage to get a cardiology appointment for July 15th, 3 weeks into the future. That was a Monday afternoon, and by the early morning of Wednesday, June 26th, I was shaking and vomiting and panicking. While this was going on, I was texting my wife to keep her updated because she was out of the country. Basically, I told her the same stuff I said at the beginning of this video, how I felt about it, and the fact that I was going to a hospital because I wasn't going to try to stick it out for 3 weeks. A little before 6:30 in the morning, I put on my watch to keep track of my pulse, threw on some clothes, and texted my wife that I was headed to the emergency room at St. David's Hospital here in Austin. Then I drove myself to the emergency room. That's a really stupid idea. Don't do that. It was a little early for rush hour traffic, so my drive was about 10 minutes, and then like some kind of model citizen, I parked in the parking garage and started walking to the emergency room, but I didn't make it. I collapsed in the parking lot. I was kind of half conscious, and I looked for the first person I saw in scrubs and asked them to go into the ER and get somebody with a wheelchair to come get me. By that point, I was so foggy, I couldn't tell you if I got in the wheelchair myself or somebody put me there. I barely remember the ER waiting room. I realized later my wife had called me when I was on the way to the hospital, and she was still on the line while all this was going on. Apparently, eventually one of the ER people had talked to her on the phone and she'd hung up. But then we had a text conversation after that that I don't remember having, and here it is. I spent most of the morning unconscious except for about 3 or 4 minutes when I woke up to see my friend Brian had come to the hospital. He was in the ER stall with me. Solid work, Brian. I thought I waited until I was ready to make it through this without. Definitely thankful for Brian being there, and thankful to all the other people that behind that. The next time I was conscious enough to realize what was going on, I was being wheeled into a cardiac catheterization lab. I remember being moved over to the x-ray table and people explaining to me what's going on, but then the sedatives hit and I was out again. And I guess not much longer I woke up when somebody lifted my shoulder really hard and slammed a sticky pad on there and another one on my abdomen. Now, I was a nurse for 22 years. I knew exactly what this was. And I remember just saying, defib pads? And somebody said, yeah, your blood pressure's tanking. Surprised I could even remember that. And I remember panicking a little bit and saying some things. Basically begging them to save my life so I can see my kids again. The reply I got was, I'll do my best. It sounded to me like someone who didn't think I was going to make it. Once again, I drifted off, but this time not because of medications. If you're going to have your heart stop, do it in a room full of cardiologists. I flatlined and my heart didn't respond to the meds they gave me on the code blue. There was no shock because you don't shock a flatline. They saved me by doing open heart surgery right there in the cath lab. I had a centrally cannulated ECMO placed, and that's what kept my blood moving and kept me oxygenated for a few days in the ICU. A couple days later, they realized the right side of my heart was still trying to function, so they switched some things around. I'll explain all that later. To me, the next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes and looking at my aunt and uncle standing over me and wondering, how did they get here so fast? That was about a week later in July in San Antonio, but to me at the time, I felt like it was the same day. I missed... It was really surreal. It was really surreal. I missed several days just Rip Van Winkle style. And apparently from what people tell me, I had been awake for like the whole day before that, even communicating by nodding and blinking. And I don't remember any of that. Meanwhile, what I missed was being put on that ECMO pump, as well as another small pump called an Impella that was meant to be like a temporary helper. Also missed my first ambulance ride, not that I'd really want to experience it. When I got to San Antonio, they switched out that small Impella pump for a bigger one that was meant to last longer, and when they saw how well that was doing, they had removed the ECMO. So I never saw myself on the ECMO, and I guess I never will. My wife said she couldn't bring herself to take any pictures at the time. She took a picture of the machine. First pictures she took were when I was awake. So I woke up intubated, which was a weird feeling. I had the tube down my throat to help with my breathing. Also had a nasogastric tube that went in my nose and down to my stomach so they could feed me. I had a Foley catheter, which is a tube that goes up into your bladder and drains urine out into that little plastic box that makes everybody feel uncomfortable when they visit someone in the hospital. I had 4 chest tubes that were placed in my upper body to help drain away fluid from my heart and lungs. I had that Impella pump, which I'd already mentioned, and I had a monitor that would beep like every 5 minutes as my heart cycled its way through a bunch of different arrhythmias. I was in San Antonio's Methodist Hospital, which was recommended by pretty much everyone who knew anything about heart failure. Funny side note, I was moved by transfer ambulance in the middle of the night so they could avoid traffic, but of course there was a crash on Interstate 35 because that's just Central Texas. The whole trip took about 4 hours, which is about 2.5 hours longer than it should have. It didn't bother me. I was, by the way, between being unconscious so many times and the medications and all the stress of it, my timelines are probably a little messed up. I might check in with my wife to have her fix any of the errors I make in my narration here. Like until recently, I thought the day that I woke up and realized where I was July 2nd, but I guess it might have been July 3rd. Anyway, as soon as I was awake and oriented to where I was and knew what was going on, people started talking to me about choices, mainly between a mechanical heart pump and a heart transplant. It was a weird thing to wake up to, and my reaction was just like, wait. There's got to be another option. Let's talk. What else have you got? But realistically, there weren't any other options. My old heart wasn't going to keep me alive on its own, and my best choice was the transplant. Otherwise, I'd have a big metal pump put on the bottom of my heart, which, by the way, runs on 2 big batteries and a control device, which all fit on a belt that I have to wear at all times and keep charged at all times, and can't go in the water and can't take a shower, and no thank you. No swimming, no boating, no jumping, no horseback riding, no skiing, no bicycle, no lifting anything over 10 pounds, no MRIs, no slam dancing, no singing in the rain. And even knowing all this, it took me a few days to really grasp that I needed a heart transplant. I knew the facts, I just couldn't, I don't know how to explain it. The workup was quite a thing. It was about the most medical attention I've ever gotten in my life. X-rays, ultrasounds, a colonoscopy, and more lab draws than you could ever imagine. At one point, this nurse walked in the room with a giant Ziploc bag full of lab tubes to draw blood. There were more than I've ever seen in one place in my life, and I was a nurse for 22 years. Probably about 50. They said it was a little bit more than what they take when you donate blood. Except donating blood isn't 9 cc's at a time. Luckily, along the way, someone put in a PICC line, so drawing the blood wasn't as big a deal as it could have been. And by the way, when I first woke up in Methodist Hospital, I couldn't move because I was so full of edema. My arms felt like cinder blocks, and I hadn't even tried to move my legs. And by don't move, I mean seriously, I couldn't lift my arms more than a couple of inches off the, and it took everything I had. When I went into the ER in Austin, I weighed 180 pounds, and about 5 pounds of that was probably fluid buildup from the heart failure. And I'm told at one point at Methodist, I had gotten up to 215 pounds of mostly fluid. That's a 35-pound weight gain. Took a lot of diuretics and a really strict fluid restriction to get me to lose enough weight to be able to get up and hopefully walk. Oh, the walk. First time I tried to walk, I didn't. I got up, my legs immediately felt like they were being crushed by a truck, and I fell onto the physical therapist. Took a few days of walking just a few steps at a time with people almost carrying the whole weight of my body before I was able to finally walk out in the hallway. My first hallway walk was about 80 feet, and I had to stop a bunch of times along the way, and I had a friend following me with a wheelchair in case I just bonked and couldn't go anymore. And eventually, with a lot of work, I was able to get myself to take several laps around the ICU, of course, trailing all my machines along in tow. I had some pretty draconian fluid and salt restrictions. Eventually, all the fluid came off my body, along with a bunch of muscle and fat, and I got down to 160 pounds, and I looked like a zombie. I looked terrible. I was officially put on the heart transfer list on July 18th, and from there on, it was my job just to do everything the doctors told me to do and get stronger and make everybody happy so that I get that heart transplant. Of course, I realized along the way that what I was hoping for was a little weird, because you're hoping for a chance with an organ that you're hoping for somebody to die. I mean, not hoping for somebody to die, but I mean, I try to self-justify by saying, you know, this person had their accident and was gone anyway, and I had nothing to do with that, but it's still, it's a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling. I spent 39 days living in that ICU from when I was listed to when the heart came, just waiting and trying to entertain myself. Thankfully, my wife was able to visit most of the time. I forgot, yeah, during that time I got COVID. So for a week I was quarantined. The only people that could come into my room were doctors and the nurse that was taking care of me at the time. And they had to go through a little side room, like a decontam room, before they could come in. The wall that's usually this glass wall that has the door that people come in and out was locked so that people from the outside couldn't get in. I could get out if I could walk. About the third day into the week-long quarantine, I was going stir crazy. I was bored. TV was no longer entertaining. I watched all of YouTube. There was no one to talk to, so I started journaling. I always thought journaling was kind of like a hippie woo-woo thing to do, but it made sense in this moment. It's not something, you know, I thought I ever would do, and I really haven't continued it like I should have. But at least I got some memories to hold on to and pass on. Then as soon as I'm back in a regular ICU room, they tell me, don't eat or drink anything because you're going downstairs for a heart ablation and cardioversion. Apparently they were sick of coming in the room to check the monitor every time the alarm went off so they could see what particular arrhythmia I was throwing at that moment. Spent most of my time watching movies with my wife when she was there. When she wasn't, I was journaling, straightening out files on my computer, watching a lot of YouTube. I really got into those channels where somebody puts a big chunk of wood on a lathe and starts working, and you try to guess as he's going what it's going to end up being. Or there's no narration, almost ASMR videos of somebody restoring an old beat-up Tonka truck. The kind of stuff that when people would walk into the room, they go, what are you watching? I was bored. With a restricted diet, I ate a lot of fruit, chicken, yogurt, and an ungodly amount of cream of wheat. But every now and again, the doctors would give me a cheat meal, which was really nice. The first time around, I had, I think, Chick-fil-A and then In-N-Out, but the best was I had Via 313 pizza, and it was like Valhalla. I did my best to keep a positive attitude while I was waiting for the surgery, even though I was super bored, and I had a total of 75 days hospitalized, and out of those, I had 4 short visits with my daughters.
Very quiet. Turn left and look straight, okay? Only to Daddy's room. Daddy, go in.
It was weird because I usually see them every day. I'm generally the one that wakes them up and makes their breakfast and packs their lunch and takes them to school. I'm the one that runs them back and forth for their after-school activities. And then all of a sudden, I spent all that time where I just didn't see my kids. That was tough. But then on Saturday, August 24th, I was awakened by 2 nurses with clippers in their hands who told me to wake up because they were going to shave my entire body. It actually took a while before we finally got to surgery time because they had multiple people waiting for multiple organs from the same person. They had to line all that up before they started. My surgery time was set for Sunday night at midnight, which I thought was a weird time, but apparently it's kind of a regular thing for them. So on Sunday afternoon, my wife took all my personal items out of my room because we didn't know where I was going to end up afterwards. A regular hospital room, another ICU room, this ICU room, the freezer downstairs. I say that snarky little irreverent joke, but by then I really honestly thought maybe the universe was running out of favors to throw me. I had lucked out to that point. I had the education to know what I was experiencing was heart failure. I had the smarts to get myself to the hospital. I coded in a room full of heart doctors. They had the machines to keep me alive until my heart could kind of help itself a little so I could get away with a small pump. I'd already lived through several heart surgeries and now I was going in for the biggest heart surgery you could have. So I signed all the paperwork and the consents, and at some point a priest came in to bless me, and I'm not a religious person at all, but something told me I should just accept the blessing. It felt weird, but nice. I mean, after all, I'm agnostic, and I'm in a Protestant hospital being blessed by a Catholic priest. So later that night, the OR team came to get me, and at that time, all the call lights outside all the rooms were flashing rainbow colors, and they were assembling all the available staff to be like my cheerleaders as I was going out of the room. They asked me to pick a song to play as I went down, and it's in my nature to pick something quirky and irreverent, but it felt just not like the right thing to do at the moment. So I picked Don't Stop Me Now by Queen, and looked like I was smiling as I rolled down the hall, although in my head I was thinking, is this my last goodbye?
That's fine. There we go. All right. Yes. We need all of the equipment. You're gonna do great. We'll see you when you get out, okay?
So you're meeting me down there or coming?
So coming with you, right? Yes.
Okay. But obviously I lived. I had some really weird hallucinations in the recovery room, and eventually they brought me back to the ICU room I'd been in, still pretty gronked. And since I was intubated again, I communicated by writing, or so I thought. Anyway, all these things I thought were so important that I was writing down wound up to be jumbles and scribbles and half sentences, and I even managed to insult my wife in one of them. And I was a little out of it for a couple of days, and by Thursday I was kind of back to myself and able to walk and talk. I spent a total of 2 weeks after the surgery in the ICU, and I went home on September 9th. And I got back to my house really happy to have my freedom back, except I couldn't drive anywhere, I couldn't lift anything over 10 pounds, I couldn't sleep on my back, and there was a whole list of things that I couldn't eat. But I'm here to bitch about it, so I feel great now, no pain, I can move, I can walk, I can run, I can talk. I am kind of bummed about all the weight I gained on the steroids, but the dose is feathering down and I should be able to start getting myself to normal again. I plan to do some video deep dives into just certain aspects of this whole experience. If there's anything you'd like me to talk about, please leave it down in the comments and let me know. It's really good to be here. Life is short, so hug everyone you can. Thanks.